One wrong door, a room full of loaded guns, and the most feared Mafia boss in New Orleans, looking up from a glass of blood-red wine like he'd been waiting 2 years for her to walk through it. Della Marsh was just the woman who baked the cake. Size 18. Invisible. Told her whole life to take up less space. All she wanted that night was the kitchen. She grabbed the wrong brass handle and pushed straight into a private back room thick with cigar smoke, 12 men in black suits, and a dozen hands that all dropped toward their jackets at once. Then the scarred man at the head of the table lifted one finger. Every gun stopped. The whole room went silent as a grave. There she is. She had never seen him before in her life. So why was he staring at her like she was the answer to a prayer he'd been saying for 2 years? Why would 12 killers lower their weapons for a plus-size pastry chef in a borrowed apron? And why, before this wedding night was over, would 300 guests be sprinting through gunfire and shattered glass, with this overlooked, invisible woman the only person left alive who could stop the slaughter? To understand all of that, you have to go back. You have to understand who Della Marsh really was, and the secret she'd kept buried behind a bakery counter for 2 long, quiet years. Della was 34. She was, in her own honest words, a big woman. Size 18, soft in the arms, soft at the hips, with a round face and dark hair she kept pinned up out of the ovens. She had spent the first half of her life being told to shrink. Eat less. Want less. Take up less room at the table, in the photo, in the world. She had stopped listening a few years back. Not because it stopped hurting, because she got tired. She owned a little bakery in the Marigny called Sugar and Salt. 2 ovens, a cracked tile floor, a window that fogged up at dawn. People came from 3 parishes for her brown butter pralines and her king cakes. When she worked, flour on her forearms and the radio low, she felt like herself. Whole. Useful. But the thing about Della that nobody at that wedding knew, the thing she never put on a business card, was that she had not always smelled like vanilla and sugar. For 9 years before the bakery, Della Marsh had been a trauma nurse. Emergency room. The night shift, the bad shift, the one where the ambulances came and stacked. She had held arteries shut with her bare hands. She had counted heartbeats out loud to keep her own steady. She had been very, very good at the worst minutes of strangers' lives. And then one night 2 years passed, a night she still couldn't say out loud. She had lost a patient she should have saved, a boy, 8 years old, and something inside her had quietly closed like a door. She turned in her badge the next morning. She bought the bakery a month later. She decided she was done holding people's lives in her hands. She wanted, more than anything, to be ordinary, to be soft, to be left alone. The world, as it tends to, had other plans. It started, the way disasters often do, with a phone call and a fat check. A wedding planner named Vivian Rourke had called Sugar and Salt 3 weeks earlier. Big society wedding, she said. 5 tiers. Vanilla, fig, and honey. Money was no object, but discretion was everything. The client was private. Very private. Della should have asked whose wedding it was. She didn't. The deposit cleared, and that was enough. The night of, she drove the cake out to a restored plantation house an hour up the river. A white-column monster of a place, lit up gold against the dark, with valets and a string quartet, and 300 people who all looked like they'd been poured into their clothes. Della came in through the back, the way the help always does. Vivian met her at the service entrance. The planner was thin as a cigarette and twice as cold, dressed in black, a headset clamped to her ear. She looked Della up and down once, slow, and her mouth went tight at the corners. "You're the cake," Vivian said. "Not a question. I expected, well, get it plated. Staff don't mix with guests. Don't speak unless spoken to. And for God's sake, stay out of the photographs." Della had heard worse. She'd heard worse from her own mother. She smiled, said yes, ma'am, and went to find the kitchen. It was while she was wheeling the cake cart down a wood-paneled hallway, lost, the music thumping somewhere through the walls, that she heard the voice she least wanted to hear in the world. Della Marsh. She turned. Grant Hollis, in a rented tuxedo, a champagne flute in his hand, and 3 of his college friends behind him. Grant, who she had loved for 2 years. Grant, who had ended it on a Sunday by telling her, kindly, he thought, that he just couldn't see a future with someone who'd given up on herself. That he needed a partner who took care of her body. That she was wonderful, really, but he had to think about how things looked. He'd been a guest at this wedding, of course. Of course he had. The groom was a friend of his. His eyes went down her catering apron and back up, and a slow, ugly grin spread across his face. Oh my God, they've got you working it? That's wow. He laughed, and his friends laughed because he laughed. Hey, do me a favor, sweetheart. Go easy on the samples back there, yeah? Wouldn't want you eating the profits. The hallway was very quiet. Della felt the old heat climb her neck, the one that started in her chest and spread to her ears, the one that made her want to disappear into the floorboards. She did not disappear. Good to see you too, Grant, she said evenly, and pushed the cart past him. But her hands were shaking on the handle. And somewhere ahead, in her hurry to get away, she took a wrong turn. A right where she should have gone left. Down a darker hall, past a velvet rope someone had unhooked, to a heavy door with a brass handle that she was certain, opened into the kitchen. It did not. There she is, the man at the head of the table said. For a long moment nobody in that room breathed. The 12 men had gone still as statues, hands drifting toward jackets, eyes flicking from the stranger in the doorway to their boss and back. The boss did not look away from Della. He stood. He was tall, taller than he'd seemed sitting down, and he moved around the table without hurry, the way a man moves through a room he owns. The scar through his eyebrow caught the light. His eyes were dark and quiet and fixed entirely on her, and there was something in them she could not name. Not anger, not hunger, something closer to grief that had just been told it could stop. Boss, one of the men said carefully. Door wasn't supposed to be open. Leave us, the boss said. He didn't raise his voice. He never would, she'd learn. He didn't have to. The men filed out past her, every one of them giving her a wide, wary berth, like she was something fragile or something dangerous. They weren't sure which. The door clicked shut, and then it was just the two of them and the cigar smoke and a silence so thick Della could hear her own heart. I'm so sorry, she managed. I was looking for the kitchen. I have a cake. I'm with the caterers, I'll go. 2 years ago, the man said I was bleeding to death in an alley behind a bakery in the Marigny. Della went very still. It was 3 a.m, he went on, his voice low and even. I had 2 bullets in me, and I had crawled about 40 feet, and I had decided that was where I was going to die. Behind a dumpster that smelled like sugar. He took a step closer, and then a woman came out the back door with the trash. A big woman. Soft hands. Kind face. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't call the police, even though every single thing about me should have told her to. The hallway. The dumpster. The man. Della's knees nearly went out from under her. She remembered. God help her. She remembered every second of it. She'd been closing up alone after a double batch of king cakes for carnival. She'd hauled the trash out the back, and there'd been a man on the ground in the dark, gray-faced, soaked through, one hand pressed to his side, and the other reaching for her like a drowning man reaches for the shore. And the nurse in her, the one she thought she'd buried, had woken up. She hadn't thought. She'd just done it. Dragged him inside, cut his shirt away with her kitchen shears, packed the wounds with clean towels and her whole body weight, counted his heartbeats out loud to keep her own from flying apart, kept him alive on her bakery floor for the longest 26 minutes of her life, until 3 men in dark coats came pounding at the back door looking for him, and she'd let them in and helped them carry him to a car. And then she had slipped away into her own kitchen and locked the door and slid down the wall and shook for an hour. She had never given him her name. He had been half-conscious the whole time. She had told herself, in the weeks after, that he'd never even seen her face clearly. That it didn't happen. That a woman like her did not save a man like that. That was you, she whispered. That was me, Enzo Marchetti said. He was standing close now. Close enough that she had to tilt her head up to hold his eyes. I woke up 2 days later in a safe house, he said, and the only things I remember were a voice counting and the smell of vanilla and a pair of hands that would not let me go. I have looked for you for 2 years, miss. He waited. Marsh, she breathed. De la marche. De la. He said it slowly, like he was tasting it, like it was something he'd been saving room for. I have torn this city apart looking for you, De la Marche. I had men checking every bakery in 3 parishes. I thought I'd imagined you. A muscle moved in his jaw. And tonight you walked through the wrong door at my sister's wedding. She let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The cake, she said stupidly. I made the cake. And Enzo Marchetti, head of the oldest crime family in New Orleans, a man the newspapers called the ghost of the river, a man who had not smiled in front of his own crew in longer than they could remember, threw his head back and laughed. He walked her out himself. That alone was enough to silence a room. Enzo Marchetti, with a plus-size pastry chef on his arm, her flour-dusted apron and his $1,000 suit, walking together out of the private wing and into the bright, loud heart of the reception like the most natural thing in the world. People stared. People always stared at Enzo. But tonight they were staring at the woman beside him, and Della felt every one of those looks land on her skin, and for the first time in her life, she did not try to make herself smaller under them. It is a strange and powerful thing to be looked at like you belong by the one man no one would dare to question. They had not made it 20 feet before Vivian Rourke came cutting across the floor, headset bouncing, face like a slammed door. You. The planner's voice was a furious hiss. She hadn't yet clocked who Della was standing next to. I told you, staff do not come into the reception. What is wrong with you? You cannot just... Vivian. Enzo's voice was quiet. It cut through hers like a blade through cake. The planner froze. The color drained out of her face as she finally looked up and registered exactly whose arm her cake girl was on. Mr. Marchetti, she stammered. I had no idea she was. This is Della Marche, Enzo said. She's my guest. She will be treated as my guest. Whoever spoke to her tonight as if she were anything less than that. His dark eyes moved slowly across the room, and they stopped just for a beat on Grant Hollis, who had gone white at his table. Is no longer welcome in any room I am standing in. Is that understood? Perfectly, Vivian whispered. Good. Now get Miss Marsh a glass of whatever she likes, and a real chair, and you will smile while you do it. Vivian practically ran. Della should have felt triumphant. Harvard did. But mostly she felt the warmth of the big hand resting at the small of her back, steady and sure. And she thought, no one has ever stood between me and the world like this. Not once. Not ever. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, Enzo said. I did. He turned to face her, and the cold command was gone, replaced by something careful and almost shy in a man who clearly was not built for shy. 2 years I owed you a debt I couldn't pay because I couldn't find you. Della, let me be very clear, because I'm not a man who is good at being unclear. I did not look for you for 2 years to thank you and shake your hand. I looked for you because the woman who held my life together with her bare hands and asked for nothing, that is a woman I have not been able to stop thinking about. Not for a single day. She stared at him. You don't even know me. Then let me, he said, dance with me. Right now. In front of all of them. And let me start. The string quartet was playing something slow. The floor was full of thin, beautiful, important people. Della Marche, who had spent her whole life being told to stay out of the photograph, put her hand in his and let the most feared man in New Orleans pull her into the center of the light. She would remember that dance for the rest of her life. Not because it was perfect, because of the way he held her, like she was not too much, not too heavy, not too anything. Like she was exactly enough. His hand spanned her back. Her cheek found the warm wall of his chest. And around them the whispers rose like a tide. Who is she? Who is she? Who is she? And for once in her life, Della did not care to make herself understood. But Della Marche had spent 9 years on a trauma floor. And 9 years on a trauma floor does something to a person. It makes them read a room the way other people read a clock. Faces, exits, hands. The set of a man's shoulders when he is about to do something terrible. And somewhere in the middle of that dance, with her eyes half closed against Enzo's lapel, the old instinct woke up and started whispering. Something was wrong. She lifted her head. She looked, really looked, the way she used to look at a waiting room full of people, any one of whom might code in the next 10 minutes. The groom. Dana. He kept checking his watch. Not the nervous look of a new husband, but the flat, counting look of a man waiting on a clock. He'd barely touched his bride all night, and his eyes kept going to the same place. The wide doors at the back of the ballroom, where 4 catering men in white jackets stood too still, hands folded too low, jackets cut a little too square at the hip. Della knew what a gun under a jacket did to the line of a coat. She had pulled too many of them out of too many waistbands in the ER to ever unknow it. "Enzo," she said quietly, not stopping the dance, keeping her voice light, keeping her smile on for the watching room. "Don't look yet." The 4 men by the back doors in white. "They're not waiters." She felt him go still under her hands. Not panic. Something colder. Sharper. "How do you know?" He murmured in her hair, the 2 of them still swaying. 2 lovers and nothing more to any eye in that room. "Their shoes are wrong." Waiters were soft soles. They're on their feet all night. "Those are hard soles, square toes. And the one on the left has a holster rub on his right hip. I can see where the jacket's worn shiny. They've been armed a long time." She drew a slow breath. "And your sister's new husband has looked at that door 11 times in 4 minutes, and he keeps checking the time like he's waiting for something to start." For a moment, Enzo said nothing. They turned once more under the chandelier. "Dane Calderon," Enzo said very softly, and the name came out like a curse. "My sister married a Calderon. We were told the family was finished. We were told there was nothing left to fear." His arms tightened around her, not from fear, from fury. "It's a wedding. Get the whole family in one room. Unarmed. Happy. Off our guard." He exhaled. "It's a trap, and I walked my entire bloodline into it." "Then walk them back out," Della whispered. "Quietly. Now, before they start." She felt him nod once against her temple. And that was the moment Dane Calderon checked his watch one last time, looked up at the back doors and nodded. It happened the way bad things always happen on the trauma floor. Not slow, not cinematic. All at once. The 4 men in white pulled their jackets back. Someone screamed. The first gunshot cracked the chandelier light into 1,000 falling pieces, and 300 guests in their poured-on clothes became a stampede of pure animal terror. But Enzo Marchetti's men were not unarmed. Not really. They never were. And in the half-second of warning Della had bought them, that single half-second, the difference between a massacre and a fight was decided. Bruno, Enzo's right hand, was already moving, already shouting, already getting bodies between the shooters and the family. Enzo spun, and his first instinct, his very first instinct in the middle of bullets and breaking glass, was to throw his whole body around Della and drive her down behind an overturned banquet table. "Stay down," he said into her ear, his hand cradling the back of her head. "Stay down, you understand me. Enzo, I will not lose you twice." And then he was up and gone into the chaos, and Della was alone behind the table with her heart slamming, and the screaming, and the smell she knew too well, copper and gunpowder and fear. She could have stayed down. He'd told her to. Every sane cell in her body wanted to. But then, over the noise, she heard it. A specific sound. A wet, struggling, gurgling breath. The sound of a chest wound. The sound she could not, would not, unhear. 20 feet away, slumped against the cake table she had wheeled in herself, was Gianna Marchetti, the bride. Enzo's little sister, in her white dress, with a spreading red flower blooming high on the left side of her chest, her eyes wide and her lips going blue. And Della Marsh stopped being a pastry chef. She came up off the floor and she ran, not away toward 300 pounds of panic moving through a war zone toward a dying girl, as she dropped to her knees in a wreckage of her own wedding cake and put her hands exactly where they had been trained to go. Hey, look at me. Gianna, my name is Della. I'm a nurse, and I am not going anywhere. Her hands were already working, finding the wound, pressing hard, with the whole weight she had spent her life apologizing for, and now, finally, needed. Tension pneumo, she muttered, the words coming back like she'd never left. Sucking chest wound. Okay. She grabbed a cake knife, clean. She'd unwrapped it herself an hour ago, and a roll of catering cellophane from the toppled cart. She had no kit. She had no hospital. She had a kitchen knife, plastic wrap, table linens, and 9 years. It was enough. She sealed the wound on 3 sides so the trapped air could escape, but no more could rush in. She found a second hole. There was always a second hole, an exit. People forgot the exit and packed it. She rolled the girl to keep the good lung up. She put Gianna's bride's bouquet under her own knees to stay off the broken glass, and she counted out loud, "Steady, breathe with me in 2, 3 out, 2, 3, the same way she'd once counted on a bleeding man behind a dumpster. She did not look up, not when the gunfire peaked, not when it stopped, not when Boots came running. She kept her hands on the girl's chest and her eyes on the girl's eyes, and she held a life together with her bare hands, the one thing in this world she had ever truly been the best at. When she finally looked up, Enzo was on his knees across from her, his suit torn, blood on his cheek that wasn't his, staring at his sister, and then at Della's hands, and then at Della's face like he was watching something holy. "She's alive," Della said. Her voice cracked. "She's stable, but she needs a real surgeon in the next 20 minutes, or she won't stay that way. You said you had a doctor. Call your doctor." He called his doctor, and Gianna Marchetti lived. The men in white did not. That part Della did not see, and chose never to ask about. She knew the kind of world she had walked into. She had known at the moment a bleeding man reached for her behind a dumpster 2 years ago. She made her peace with the not knowing. But there were 2 reckonings she did see, and both of them she carried with her after, the way you carry a song you can't stop humming. The first was Dane Calderon. He'd tried to run in the chaos, the way cowards do, and Bruno had caught him at the valet stand with his bags already packed for a flight that, it turned out, had been booked 3 weeks before the wedding. He was dragged back through the wreckage of the ballroom in front of everyone, sobbing, his rented tuxedo soaked through, while his new bride lay on a stretcher being loaded into a private ambulance. Enzo did not raise his voice to him either. He simply crouched down, looked the man in the eyes, and said something too quiet for anyone to hear, and whatever it was made Dane Calderon stop breathing for a second. Then Bruno took him away. Della never saw him again. The papers a week later would report him missing. They would never find him. The second reckoning was smaller and, if she was honest, sweeter. Grant Hollis. In all the chaos, in all the gunfire, brave Grant. Grant who had told her she'd given up on herself. Grant who had told her to go easy on the samples. Had wedged himself into a coat closet and pulled the door shut and stayed there, whimpering, while a plus-size pastry chef saved a woman's life 20 feet away. When the police and Enzo's people finally cleared the room, they found him there, and the story of where brave Grant had spent the gunfight spread through his entire social circle by the end of the week. He moved to Houston not long after. Della heard about it and felt nothing at all, which was, she realized, its own kind of healing. But all of that came later. That night, in the strobing red light of the ambulance, Enzo Marchetti took Della Marsh's blood-soaked hands in both of his and held them up between them like something precious. "You knew," he said, his voice rough. "You saw it coming. You saved my sister's life with a cake knife and a roll of plastic. And 2 years ago you saved mine." He shook his head slowly, in something close to disbelief. "I spent 2 years thinking I was looking for the woman who saved me. I was wrong. I was looking for the only woman alive who keeps saving everything I love and asks for nothing in return. I asked for the kitchen," Della said, and surprised herself by laughing. "I just wanted to find the kitchen." Enzo laughed too, soft and wrecked. He lifted her hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles, blood and sugar and all, and did not let go. He came to the bakery the next morning. She'd half expected never to see him again, expected him to vanish back into the closed-door world he came from, the way men like that do. But at 7 a.m., with the city still cool and the window fogged with the breath of her ovens, the little bell over the door of sugar and salt rang, and Enzo Marchetti walked in jeans and a dark shirt, looking somehow younger and far less like a ghost. "Gianna's awake," he said. "She's asking for the woman who saved her. She wants to learn to bake. She says if she's going to keep nearly dying, she'd at least like to leave behind a good king cake." He paused. "I told her I'd ask the best baker in New Orleans. She happens to also be the bravest woman I've ever met." Della came around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "You could have called," she said. "I don't want to call," Enzo said. I want to stand in your kitchen and watch you work and bring you bad coffee from the place on the corner and be here every morning at 7 until you get sick of me, which I'm hoping is never." He took a breath, and the most dangerous man in New Orleans looked, for one moment, completely undefended. "I've spent my whole life being feared, Della. Nobody has ever just let me sit at the counter. You let a bleeding stranger onto your floor at 3 in the morning and ask for nothing. Let me earn the right to stay." Delamarche looked at him a long moment, at the scar through his eyebrow, at the careful, hopeful set of his shoulders, at the way he stood in her doorway like a man who would, without hesitation, put his whole body between her and the world. And she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who made herself smaller, who stayed out of the photograph, who believed somewhere deep down that a woman like her did not get to be the one a man crossed the city to find. She thought, there she is. "The coffee on the corner is terrible," she said. "But the bell rings at 6, not 7. If you won't watch me work, you'll be early." Enzo Marchetti smiled, the real one, the rare one, and pulled out a stool at her counter and sat down like a man who had finally, after a very long time, found the room he'd been looking for. She slid him a praline, still warm. "On the house," Della said. "Just this once. After that, even Mafia bosses pay full price." "Yes, ma'am," he said. And he did, every single morning, for the rest of their lives. So, that's the story of the woman who walked through the wrong door and found the one man who'd been searching for her all along. She didn't need rescuing. She did the rescuing. Twice. And in the end, the big girl they told to stay out of the photograph became the only thing the most powerful man in the city ever truly knelt for. Now I want to hear from you. Be honest. Did you see the groom's betrayal coming before Della did? And what would you have done if you'd opened that door? Would you have run, or would you have stayed? Tell me down in the comments. I read every single one. If Della's story warmed your heart, do me one small favor. Tap that like button, share this with someone who needs to be reminded that they are exactly enough, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. There's a brand new one dropping very soon, and trust me, you do not want to miss who walks through the door next.